News from the world of electric vehicles. Talk about looking out. GM will now follow Ford and partner with Tesla to use Tesla's network of fast chargers. Tesla bull Kathy Woods joining us earlier in the show. Here's what she had to say about it.
It does help Tesla underwrite the charging station expense, because if you look at Tesla's sales, they are highly concentrated on the coasts. Now it's going to make a lot more sense for Tesla to roll out charging stations that much faster throughout the country.
Joining us right now with his reaction, Gene Munster, managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management. Good morning to you. We've been talking all morning about just the implication in terms of just straight up cash on cash earnings that this may create for Tesla, beyond the branding, beyond all of the other things that this may do for Tesla. The fact that now this becomes the standard and gives them an opportunity to grow even larger just as an infrastructure play, Gene.
It's true, Andrew. I mean, this is a positive step for a small business that investors historically have not given much attention to. That is that infrastructure, that charging network. There are publicly traded companies that do just that. But still, when you look at the context of Tesla's overall market cap, look at their revenue, this is a fractional business and will probably remain a small business. Even with the addition of Ford, GM, and other car makers, undoubtedly will go to this charging network. So I view this more as a positive for GM and Ford. It's probably a neutral, a slight positive for Tesla, like we talked about, because they will pick up some infrastructure revenue. But ultimately is that they are giving the rails to these competitors which have been struggling. Right. And I think traditional auto is in a really tight spot over the next decade, in part because of infrastructure. Now, good news for Ford and GM, they're going to be leveraging that. And I think ultimately what Elon is doing here is he's making good on his promise that he wants to advance electrification. This is part of the company's mission statement to advance the energy independence. And so I think he's doing this as more of a move for greater EVs than a positive for Tesla.
Look, I think it's an extraordinary thing, what he's now done. And there's no question. I mean, these mortal enemies, you probably listened to that Twitter Spaces between Mary Barra and him yesterday. I mean, it was awkward, to be honest with you, just hearing the different personalities on the phone. But it's an amazing thing. The thing that the upside, of course, is for the industry, for the country. There is potential, and by the way, I was going to argue for Tesla generally in terms of potentially both revenue and the sort of marketing and advertising they get from every time any of these vehicles now go to a Tesla charging station. Having said that, one of the things that's popped up on Twitter, no less, this morning is a number of folks who say, look, there's now a line around the block already for some of these Tesla charging stations, and the line is only going to grow larger. That's not actually a good thing for the Tesla brand. What do you make of that?
It's something that's real. If you'd poll Tesla owners, I'm not one of them, but if you'd poll a Tesla owner, they would probably be disappointed in this announcement. One thing that came up on that Twitter space yesterday that you're referring to is that Tesla would not give preferential treatment in terms of being able to jump the line with some of these other car makers in the charging line, and I think and they would not essentially demote what these other car makers are getting from a technology as speeding the charging speed times. So they're not going to meter it, and I think that that is something that could backfire is probably too strong of a word, but this range anxiety, Kathy is spot on. Range anxiety is the big issue here. It's kind of a bizarre topic but ultimately range anxiety and charging times and those wait lines all play into it. Right. And I think you could see a situation where this is viewed as a negative by Tesla owners. They
may not advantage GM or Ford per se, but my question was actually going to be whether you think that the way the charging stations ultimately will work, that it'll still be a more seamless process if you're a Tesla driver over one of the others, or you think it's literally will ultimately on an app be the exact same, the same way the billing process, where everything as seamless no matter what kind of car you get in?
They addressed that both the Ford and the GM announcements addressed that in a subtle way. is that next year these cars will be able to be charged from these the Tesla charging networks with an adapter.
Right.
But in 2025,
that's not seamless, obviously.
That's not seamless. Correct. 2025, they want to embed the charging network into their software. So what that means is that if you were going to go on a trip right now with a Tesla, you can pinpoint your destination, and then it will optimize your charging route, essentially. That is something that is integrated. That's going to start, they say, in 2025. And so I think from a user experience, the Ford and GM is going to be pretty similar to Tesla in 2025. Now, that's just for the charging piece. I think Tesla has an advantage when it comes to software. Ford would agree with that. So maybe there is some fit and finish around the software that isn't quite the same. But the substance of it, there's going to be a relatively parity around the charging experience by 2025.
Is there going to be a way to, for Tesla, you think, to market or provide other services to GM and Ford owners over time?
I mean, they could. Yeah. I think just given Elon, I think that there's some fun direction that they could take these charging stations over time. I mean, they could really stick it to traditional auto and turn these into showrooms. I mean, they could put a couple like micro showrooms, and they've kicked around that idea in the past of kind of making these destinations Tesla branded destinations. Now, presumably those nuances would have been addressed in some of these details. I wouldn't imagine that Ford and GM would want that. But I think from a branding perspective, there's a big opportunity that Tesla can do as they build out this infrastructure. And Kathy, again, is correct here, is that in the sense that they're going to be GM and Ford. They haven't been explicit about what the amount is, but they're going to be funding some of that infrastructure build. So presumably, Tesla could add some of these other services or just add more branding at the cost of traditional auto.